Hi, I'm Neil and welcome back to my garage. Today we're going to be doing something slightly different than in previous videos. We're going to build something for the outside rather than what we normally do, which is in the inside. What we have right here is we have a plant mobile that I built for my parents' garden. They want to be able to water their plants without having to walk all the way around. Also, before we get started, there are two things I want to note. Number one, this is a how-to build video. It's actually going to be a two-part series. And then we also have a how-to design series, 7 videos where I go through step-by-step in SOLIDWORKS for Makers and show you how I created each of these parts and how we got to this point in the build. So I highly recommend you check that out because there's a lot of good information. 2, I'm very much aware that this is built with redwood. While most of us like to build with cedar, in California, at least where I live, lumber prices never came down. So when I was at the store and saw the price of cedar, I had to quickly put that down because I didn't want this to be a super expensive project, and I decided to build this with redwood. If it lasts for a few years, that's fine. I can always rebuild it with cedar, but I just want to state that yes, I am aware this was built with redwood. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Come on. Okay, so first thing you want to do once you get your lumber from the big box store, we picked up a 2x2 here, is we want to cut off this factory edge. Even though we're not going to be joining this on any other application, for me, I just like to get rid of the factory edge by habit. So I'm going to be taking this over to the miter saw and cutting that. Okay, now that we're done cutting it, we're going to measure the length that we want to cut our first strut at, which is 32 inches. So we're going to mark that. And then we're going to put that back in the miter saw and then cut our 32-inch length, our first one. Perfect. Always make sure you wear a mask when doing this. Next, we're going to measure another 32-inch length to match our first one, and we're going to cut that as well. Now we're going to put our pieces side by side and measure half in the center of our 32 inches at 16 and do 1.5 inches total width for our other piece. Then from here, we're going to move over back to the miter saw and use the depth control feature on our miter saw so that we cut our half lap. We're going to start with the left, then we're going to cut the right. Now it's important that you take your time doing this. You want to make sure you don't get hurt. Now as you can see, I'm sliding over ever so slightly my piece and then I'm making a cut, sliding it over, making a cut. Doing it using this method is going to make it easier for us when we move this off the miter saw and back to the workbench where we have to take a chisel and take out all of our chips. With these thin pieces, they're going to be a lot easier to break than if we were to try to chisel out them as a whole. Okay, so now we're going to be clamping our piece down to the workbench with a spare piece of redwood, mostly because I don't want the chisel to slip off and puncture the workbench. From personal experience, that's no fun to repair. So we're going to lightly take out our chips, and then we're going to come through on the bottom and just slide our chisel through to try to get the notches out. Once that's done, we're going to be taking a piece of sanding block, and then we're going to go back and forth until it's nice and smooth. Once that's done, we're going to go through and test fit our piece and then move back to the miter saw and then also cut those half laps as well. So go ahead and enjoy this little time lapse while we take a quick break from my audio. Okay, so now that we're over here, like I said, this is the second method where I scribe the sides and then knock it out with the chisel from there. And this was my preferred method. This was actually way easier to sand it down and get it nice and snug. And we're going to take our other piece and just fit it till it's nice and snug. Okay, look at that. Now we're going to grab that other piece, sand that one more time and drop it down, and look at that. A nice, great fit. It's not 100% exactly how I wanted it, but as it's going to be outdoors, no one's really going to notice. So now we're going to mark with the center of our drill bit where we want to put our 2 screws in order to hold these 2 pieces together. Now also note that I should have come back and put some wood glue in there, but I do this off camera, so just note that I would recommend that you do that. So we're going to put in our first screw, and then we're going to take our drill bit, and we're also going to mark for our second screw. Always keep it straight, and then do a countersink just because it looks nice. And now we're done. That should hold it for the majority of the weight that it needs. Okay, now I'm going to plug myself and grab my sanding alignment tool, and I'm going to use that to put my sandpaper on the sander. There's a video that I have for the alignment tool. Go ahead and check that out. And now we're just going to lightly sand this because when I did grab the redwood, it was extremely rough and there were a lot of splinters. So now this is what it looks like after it's sanded nice and smooth. Okay, with that, we're going to be grabbing a boat sweet swivel that I found online at Home Depot. So it's good for marine applications, which means that if water gets on it when my parents are watering, that's perfectly fine. And so we're going to be marking the slots, and then we're going to be taking a punch and putting in the center where we want our drill bit to go. So with that, we're going to drill just like we did on the other pieces. And this is going to mark where our center is going to be for the swivel. So we're going to drop the swivel down. And then we're going to be taking some 1/4-inch screws that I got from the big box store. These are exterior screws. Don't use interior screws. We're going to be using that in order to hold down our piece to our struts. We give it a little bit of a turn and now it works. Now we're going to be putting our piece there so that we can mark that in order to join our post. So this little block right here was just a scrap piece of redwood that I had laying around. And we're also going to give it those screws that we got from the big box store. Next, it's time to set the post in the center, so we're going to measure for that. Now keep in mind the post will be going inside a pole, so we have to shave it down. So we're going to move it back to the table saw and do 3 1/8. Now the reason why we're doing it a little bit big is because I'm nowhere near the site. So 3 1/8 will do for now, and if need be, when I install, I could sand it down. So we're going to mark where we want our holes to go. I was going to do pocket hole screws here, but I don't have my pocket hole jig. So instead, we're going to be taking off our seat swivel again so that we can drill in our screws from the very top. So we have to loosen all the screws again. And then we're going to take 3 long 3-inch screws and drill them in from the top of our piece. We're going to put some countersink so that we don't hit the seat swivel as well. After we have our screw holes, we're going to place it on a jig so that we can have a nice lined up surface. So we're using a 1/8 spacer with another 2x4 piece of square redwood. And then we're going to take our clamp and clamp it down so that it doesn't move. Then we're going to add some tight bond 3 glue, and then we're going to screw into our post. Then we're going to take our 3-inch screw, and then we're just going to put it in maybe 75% of the way, and then we're going to line it up with the other 2 using a speed square. Now I'm just checking for squareness and we're good. So now we can put back our screws that we used for the seat swivel for their final orientation. Okay, now we can drop this thing in a vise and hopefully it works. Perfect, we spin it around and it spins on its axis, so success.
Okay everyone, I thought that would be a good spot to end the video in. What we need to do in video number 2 is we need to add the hooks as well as drive over and install this thing. As mentioned in the beginning, this is a how-to build series, but we also created a how-to design series where we went through and designed all these parts for the Plantmobile. So if I were you, I would recommend going ahead and checking that out as there's a lot of good information there. As always, don't forget to hammer that subscribe button because it lets us know that you like what we're doing over here. Please let me know down in the comments what you liked and didn't like about this video or what you would prefer to see in other videos. As always, I'm Neil the Garage Guy and have a great day. Peace.